Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales come to life. Enjoy the journey. The alarm shrieked through Orbital Station 7 like a banshee made of static and fear. Jace Calder's hands flew across the emergency console, his fingers leaving smears of sweat on the haptic display as fire suppression systems failed one by one. The station's rotation had stopped 40 seconds ago. Bad sign. Without centrifugal gravity, the flames would spread in unpredictable spheres, eating oxygen in 3 dimensions. Maya, get to escape pod 77. His voice cracked through the comm, competing with the roar of superheated air rushing through compromised bulkheads. His sister's response came back steady, almost amused despite the chaos. Negative, little brother. Someone needs to anchor the fire loop manually, or this whole ring goes up. The fire loop, a last resort measure that would create a controlled burn zone, sacrificing one section to save the rest. The anchor point sat in Maintenance Shaft C, already glowing orange through the viewport. Whoever went in wouldn't come out. "I'm closer," Jace lied, already moving toward the shaft. His irregular heartbeat hammered its off-kilter rhythm, thud, thud, skip, thud, a genetic quirk that had disqualified him from military service but somehow kept him conscious in low-oxygen environments longer than most. "I can—" "Jace." Maya's voice cut through his protest with surgical precision. "Your arrhythmia won't protect you from third-degree burns. Besides, you've got that negotiation conference next week. Someone needs to make Mom proud." He could see her through the security feed, already at the manual override, her pilot's suit starting to smoke. The smart fabric would buy her maybe 30 seconds once she opened that door. "Maya, don't—" "Someone has to hold the line." Her hand moved to the door release. Through the feed, she looked directly at the camera, at him. "Tell Mom I finally found something worth the risk." The feed cut to static. The fire loop engaged. The station lurched as explosive decompression vented the burning section into space, taking his sister with it. 3 years later, Jay still woke to the phantom smell of burning plastic and the echo of his coward's heartbeat. Alive because he'd hesitated, breathing because she hadn't. The transport broke through Varelda's atmosphere like a dive into someone else's dream. Purple clouds smeared across the viewport in shapes that shouldn't exist. Jace set his palm to the glass. The hull hummed, just enough to feel. The pilot crackled over the speaker. "Diplomatic passengers descending to Silvertide. Local gravity is 87% Earth standard. Mind your step." Jace's offbeat heart picked up its crooked rhythm. He'd taken this posting partly because Haversham's lawyers couldn't reach Varelda, too many laws against corporate meddling. Mostly, he came because Earth had too many rooms where Maya should have been. The clouds thinned. The city lifted into view. Violet crystal spires twisting upward. Thread-thin bridges between them. Veins of light running through the walls as if the place had circulation. Transit pods slid along magnetic tracks like blood cells in a loop. They touched down on a Black Mirror platform with a whisper of dampeners. That's when he saw them, a half circle of figures in black, perfectly still. The Maid delegation. He'd read the brief. On Varelda, the Maid cast were more than attendants, bodyguards, cultural shields, keepers. Each diplomat got one, no exceptions. The airlock sighed. Varelda's air rolled in. Mint, a hint of metal, something floral he couldn't place. Lighter gravity made his first step feel buoyant, as if his body floated while his bones stayed earth-heavy. They didn't move while he walked the ramp. Same cut of armor, black that slid from matte to gloss as he passed. Thin bands of color for rank. Skin from deep violet to pale lavender, each marked with a unique map of light. Then one broke rank. She moved like water finding level, every step deliberate, every line clean. Twilight violet skin, soft light pulsing beneath. Silver hair braided with fine metal threads that chimed once, like a quiet bell. She stopped close enough that he saw starburst spokes inside her blue irises. His wayward pulse stuttered. Jace called her. Her voice carried melody and command in equal parts. I am Eloya Virel. I will keep you for the duration of your testimony. She went to one knee, smooth as a single motion. Before he could react, her palm settled over his heart, warm through his shirt, intimate in a way the ceremony didn't explain. She spoke Vireldan first, liquid sounds the translator chased and missed, then, without lifting her hand, shifted to English. I bind my breath to yours. Where you walk, I follow. When you fall, I catch. Your pulse becomes my rhythm. A flicker in her eyes, surprise, then surety. You resonate. What? Jace said, rougher than he meant to. Eloya rose. Her hand slipped away, leaving a trace of heat. Up close, he saw the truth of her uniform. The apron mantle wasn't decoration, but adaptive fabric, silk soft now. A moment ago, he'd watched it stiffen on her turn. Most humans are bio-null, she said, lifting a veil so thin it barely existed, holding it near his mouth. They can't sync with our fields. You are not most humans. The veil made a small, private bubble for her next words. It smelled like mint, metal, and something like a promise. This will make protecting you either much simpler or infinitely harder. Protecting me from what? Jace asked, noticing how her other hand rested on the knife at her hip with a familiarity that wasn't ceremonial at all. Eloya's smile was quick and dangerous. From Virelda, Mr. Calder, and perhaps from yourself. She slid the veil away, a fingertip tracing his jaw. The touch lingered a beat too long, and his unruly pulse kicked hard. Around them, the other maids stayed statue still, but their light marks shifted. Judgment, amusement, something unreadable. He felt weighed and only just acceptable. Come, Eloya said, turning in a sweep that showed how the armor hugged and protected in the same breath. We have little time before someone tries to kill you. That's not reassuring, Jace said, matching her pace. The line of maids parted like water and closed behind them. I'm not here to reassure you. A glint, almost mischief, flickered in her starburst eyes. In 40 minutes, someone will attempt to assassinate you at Cafe Meridian. The reservation's already set. You know it's coming and we're still going. Of course. How else do we catch them? The transit pod was clear on all sides, a moving bubble through silver-tide spirals. Below, the city's light veins pulsed in waves. Eloya sat opposite, perfect posture, studying him with a focus that raised the hairs on his arms. Your heartbeat, she said. It's wrong. Thanks. I've only lived with it for 32 years. Her mouth twitched, the first crack in her professional mask. Wrong for a human. The pattern is familiar. She leaned in, the pod filled with the clean scent of metal and alien flowers. May I? Before he answered, two cool fingers found the spot beneath his jaw. Precision. Then a tingling, like intentional static. His offbeat heart stuttered, and for a single, impossible moment it fell into time with the city's pulse outside. Fascinating, she breathed close enough for him to feel the word. You're trying to sync with Silvertide's biorhythm. That shouldn't be possible. Impossible is kind of my specialty, he said, voice rough. It's gotten me in trouble before. Good. Trouble is where we learn who we are. She withdrew, leaving warm ghosts where her fingers had been. The pod dropped through a gap between towers. Cafe Meridian rose ahead, a crystalline dome strung between three spires, rain beating on it like tears. The storm had arrived. The drops fell in patterns instead of lines. Inside was all curves and soft light. Patrons, Vireldans and off-worlders, sat at tables that seemed to grow from the floor. In the corner, a quartet played in 7/8, pretty and a little painful. Eloya led him to a table dead center, awful tactically, completely exposed. She caught his look and smiled that dangerous smile. You're thinking like a human. Straight lines and corners, she said, settling with feline ease. Here, the safest place is often the most exposed. It forces honesty. A lavender server with slow galaxy markings set a silk veil over Jace's mouth before he could speak. For your protection, they murmured. Unfiltered opinions can overwhelm. Eloya reached across and peeled it away, fingertip grazing his lower lip. His words are mine to guard. The server's lights flared, then dimmed. They bowed and withdrew. Was that necessary? Jace asked, aware of the echo of her touch. Everything is necessary, or it is nothing. She lifted her own veil between them like a secret. Tell me, Mr. Calder, what do you know of the Servitor Codex? It governs the Maid caste, unchanged for 3 centuries. Break it and you die. Incomplete, but not incorrect. The veil turned their voices private. It defines my purpose. I am your guardian, yes, your cultural translator, your social shield. And she paused. Something unreadable moved in her sapphire eyes. And, he prompted, your resonance partner. I suspect the term is new to you. It is. On Virelda, every living thing generates a biofield. Fields can synchronize and create useful harmonics, healing, communication, and another pause. Other things. Most humans can't sync. Their fields are null-static, present but incompatible. But mine isn't. No. She leaned closer. The veil made the air between them feel warm. Your field is trying to harmonize with mine right now. Can you feel it? He could. A gentle pull, like warm magnetism. It made him want to lean. The explosion shattered every pane of glass at once. Sound warped. Shards hung like frozen rain. In the lighter gravity, debris arced in strange loops. Jace lifted from his chair. Then, Eloya's hand clamped his wrist. Down! Her mantle snapped from silk to armor, blooming into a hard dome over them. Shrapnel rang against it like chimes. Beautiful if beauty weren't trying to kill them. She moved with lethal grace. Etiquette turned combat. A figure in maintenance gray came out of the service hall, pulse weapon raised. Eloya's bow became a roll under his aim. Her curtsy rose into an uppercut that launched him in the low G. 2 careful fingers at his neck and he went limp. There will be others, she said, not winded. Panic flared in a dozen colors as patrons fled. She pulled Jace close. Through the armor he felt her heartbeat, steady, controlled, nothing like his. Another attacker pushed through smoke, then another. Eloya borrowed their momentum, dancing them into the floor. A knife thrust turned into a spin inside a guard. A grab became a shoulder dislocation disguised as a graceful pivot. Your heart, she murmured at his ear, using her body as a shield while her eyes mapped threats. It's sinking with mine. That shouldn't happen this fast. He felt it too, his skip thud trying to catch her steady pulse. Intimate, invasive, oddly calming. Through the contact, he caught edges of her senses. The cafe's biofields like heat, fading trails of the attackers, the blast shaped to kill everyone at their exact table. Professional hit, he gasped as she pulled him through glass and smoke, her mantle softening back to fabric and wrapping them both. They knew exactly where we'd sit. Yes, she said, voice gone hard. Someone inside the delegation. They slipped into a service alcove. She pinned him to the wall, her body a barrier against the chaos. Up close, the light in her skin brightened and quickened, almost hypnotic. Her forehead touched his sternum. Her palms slid his ribs, quick, precise, clinical. 3 cracked ribs on the left, she said, breath warm through his shirt. Mine are cut on the shoulder. You're lucky. Lucky? He laughed and winced. Someone just tried to turn me into vapor. They failed. She met his eyes, something fierce in the starburst blue. They failed because you're under my protection, and I do not fail. Sirens approached, calming tones, not panic. White armored responders flowed in with balletic precision. One bowed, markings flashing the official cadence. Keeper Virel, the Archon requests immediate attendance. The Archon can wait, Eloya said. My charge needs a medic. The Archon insists. It concerns the safety of all off-worlders. Jace saw her jaw tighten, her hand drift toward the not ceremonial knife. Tell the Archon we will attend after... It's fine, Jace cut in. I've worked through worse. If he has information... She studied him, then nodded once. Very well. We go armed, and we go my way. They moved through emergency tunnels, bioluminescent corridors, lifts that ran at impossible angles. Eloya never let go of his arm. Through her touch, he felt flashes of her state, concern, resolve, and beneath both, a curiosity that wasn't strictly professional. You knew this was coming, he said as a freight elevator carried them diagonally through the city. You said someone would try to kill me. I knew they'd try, she said. I didn't know they'd go this far. A glance, her light dimmed. The signature of the blast, the shape charges, conservatory training, military grade. Your military wants me dead? Not the military. The conservatory is adjacent. They train the elite of my caste. Some graduates join other branches, shadow services. The elevator shuddered and stopped. Cold bled through the walls. Frost webbed the metal. Jace's breath fogged. Power failure, Eloya said, voice tight. Not an accident. The lights died. Only her markings glowed, painting purple-blue shadows that shrank the space around them. Temperature plunged. Pain spiked in his ribs with every shiver. We have maybe 10 minutes before hypothermia becomes critical. Her hands found his face in the dark, warm anchors. There's a protocol, shared heat. It requires closeness. Whatever it takes, he managed through chattering teeth. She pulled him to the floor and wrapped the mantle around them both. The fabric gave off heat, but not enough. I need access to your bionodes, she said, fingers already working his buttons with practiced speed. Survival protocol, nothing more. Then cool skin met his chest. Sure hands mapped the strongest points of his field. Clinical touches that felt like everything but clinical. Her breath brushed his neck as she set the count to sync them. 7 breaths together, she whispered, lights in her skin pulsing with the cadence. 6 as 1, 5 to sync, 4 to warm, 3 to live, 2 to bond. 1, their fields locked. The sensation was a wave of warmth, home, something alien and holy. Systems hummed awake around them, answering their combined resonance. Neither of them moved. The intimacy of true synchronization held them still. This is unprecedented, Eloya breathed, her science at war with wonder. No human has ever reached full sync. What are you? Jace called her. Before he could answer, the elevator comm crackled with a cultured, amused voice. Mr. Calder, you're even more valuable than I hoped. A human lumiconductor will change everything. Welcome to Virelda. I am Archon Varus Selith, and you're about to become the most important human in our history, whether you survive it or not. The car lurched back into motion, carrying them upward as their matched heartbeats drummed a rhythm that felt like the start of a new world. The brakes bit. The doors slid open onto chaos orchestrated with surgical precision. Security in midnight blue armor formed a living corridor, their bioluminescent patterns rolling in waves that made Jace's eyes water. Through the gaps he glimpsed silver-tide streets, empty, but for rain falling on the diagonal, each drop catching the city's pulse like a falling star. Eloya's hand stayed on his arm, the only steady point in a world coming loose. The protection sigil on his jaw warmed. His ribs throbbed with every breath. "Transport's waiting," the security captain said. His voice filtered through a harmonizer. "Archon's orders. You're to attend the Ball of Graces." After an assassination attempt? Jace's laugh came out sharp. That's either very brave or very stupid. It's Virelden, Eloya said quietly. We don't cancel culture for violence. We absorb it, transform it. Her fingers found the edge of the collar, not quite touching the angry skin beneath. Though this changes things. The transport pod was larger than their previous one, built for security rather than sightseeing. Opaque walls hummed with dampening fields, and Jace felt his ears pop as they sealed. Eloya sat beside him rather than across, close enough that their thighs touched. Through the contact, he could feel her biofield, agitated, protective, and underneath it all, a current of guilt that made his chest tight. You're angry, he said, not a question. I'm processing. Her professional mask was back, but cracks showed at the edges. You took a geese meant for me. That's unprecedented. You say that word a lot around me, because you keep doing impossible things. She turned to face him fully, and in the pod's dim light, her bioluminescent markings painted her face in soft purple blue. No one has ever taken another's burden like that. The collar wasn't even calibrated for human neural patterns. It could have killed you instantly. But it didn't. No. Her hand moved to his chest, palm flat against his heartbeat. Your arrhythmia saved you again. The irregular pattern confused the initial binding sequence, gave your nervous system time to adapt. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. Your heart's defect keeps becoming your salvation. The transport banked sharply, and through the one small window, Jace saw their destination, the Conservatory of Service, a massive crystal structure that seemed to breathe with its own light. It rose from Silvertide's cultural district like a frozen waterfall, its surfaces reflecting and refracting the city's bioluminescence into rainbow fractals. Tell me about the Ball of Graces, he said, trying to focus on something other than the way Eloya's thumb had started tracing small circles against his chest. It's complicated. She withdrew her hand, and he immediately missed the contact. Originally, it was a celebration of successful partnerships between maids and their charges. Now it's become something else, a display of power, a marketplace of influence. Her jaw tightened, a hunting ground. And we're walking into it. Running would be worse. She stood as the transport began its descent, her armor shifting into something more formal. The utilitarian black became lustrous, the apron mantle flowing into an elegant train that seemed to capture starlight. Besides, Varys made this public. Every noble family is watching. If we don't appear, it suggests weakness. And if we do appear? Her smile was sharp as the ceremonial knife at her hip. Then we dance. The conservatory's ballroom defied physics. The ceiling curved impossibly high, its surface a living map of Virelda's bio-constellation that shifted in real time. Crystal columns twisted up from the floor like frozen tornadoes, and between them, couples moved in patterns that were part dance, part martial kata. The orchestra, a dozen Vireldans playing instruments Jace couldn't name, filled the space with music in 7/8 time that made his bones ache with its almost but not quite familiar rhythm. Eloya had transformed completely. Where her standard uniform suggested danger contained, this outfit proclaimed it. The armor gown hybrid clung to her curves before flowing into that impossible mantle, her silver hair now woven with threads that sparked with actual electricity. She moved through the crowd like a shark through water, beautiful, terrifying, utterly in her element. "Stay close," she murmured, painting a protection sigil on his jaw with a brush that appeared from nowhere. The bioluminescent ink tingled against his skin, warm and slightly electric. "This mark claims you as mine. It means anyone who touches you without permission challenges me directly. And that's bad for them? Fatal, usually." She said it casually, but her eyes tracked every movement in the room. There, Nira Sorrel, 2 o'clock. She's been watching us since we entered. Jace followed her gaze to find a Vireldan woman who moved like silk given form. Deep purple skin with gold bioluminescence, she wore a maid's uniform modified into something that belonged in high fashion, or an assassin's closet. When she caught them looking, she smiled and started their way. "Eloya," Nira purred, her voice like honey over broken glass. "And the famous human conductor. You're even prettier than the report suggested." She moved into Jace's space with practiced confidence, adjusting his collar with fingers that lingered precisely 1 heartbeat longer than appropriate. This close, he could smell her, ozone and something sharp like metal and mint. "Your maid is exceptional," Nira continued, her attention never leaving Jace's face. "The best of our generation, they say. But she hasn't told you everything, has she? About how she requested assignment to the first human conductor? How her family has been searching for someone like you for decades?" The words hit like ice water. Jace's eyes found Eloya across the sudden distance between them, and what he saw there wasn't denial. It was truth, complicated and sharp-edged. "Nira," Eloya's voice carried a warning that made the nearest dancer stop mid-step. "Now isn't the time." "When is, sister?" Nira's smile widened. "After you've bound him completely? After he's so deep in your rhythm he can't find his own beat?" She stepped back, running a finger along Jace's marked jaw. "Careful, Earthman. On Virelda, love and ownership often wear the same face." She melted back into the crowd before Eloya could respond, leaving them in a bubble of uncomfortable silence. Around them, the dance continued, but Jace could feel the weight of watching eyes, the whisper of gossip spreading like wildfire. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. "Yes." Eloya didn't look away, didn't flinch. "I knew about human conductors. I requested you specifically, but I didn't expect you." Her hand found his, and through the contact, he felt the truth of it, her confusion, her growing attachment, the way his presence had shifted something fundamental in her planning. "I wanted a tool to free my people. I found—" The lights died. Emergency bioluminescence flared from every Vireldan in the room, creating a constellation of purple, blue, and gold light. The orchestra's music warped into something discordant, and Jace felt the air pressure change. The ballroom's etiquette sensors, hidden systems that monitored posture, proximity, and propriety, suddenly reversed their function. "Down!" Eloya's hand slammed into his chest, driving him to his knees as an invisible wave of force passed overhead. Around them, anyone standing fell hard, their biofields disrupted by weaponized courtesy protocols. "Emergency pulse binding," she said, already moving. 7 bionodes synchronized, now. Her hands found him in the chaotic dark, one palm against his heart, another at the base of his skull. He mirrored her instinctively, his fingers finding the convergence points of her bioluminescent markings through the armor gown. The position was impossibly intimate, their bodies pressed close, breathing synchronized as they moved through what looked like dance but felt like war. An attacker emerged from the crowd, one of Varys' security forces, movements puppet-rigid from neural conditioning. Eloya flowed around his strike, her counterattack a curtsy that became a throw. Jace caught the rhythm, adding his own chaos, an offbeat step that made the attacker stumble, a deliberately broken posture that confused the etiquette sensors trying to track them. "You lied to me," he said between movements, the words coming out harder than intended. "I chose you before I knew you," she replied, spinning him under an energy blade that would have taken his head off. "Can you forgive someone for wanting to save her people?" He answered by blocking a strike meant for her shoulder, taking the impact on his forearm. Pain flared, but through their binding she felt it too. "Don't make me choose between truth and you." "I won't." she breathed, and then Varys was there. The Archon moved through the chaos like it was choreographed for him. Older than Jace expected, with silver-white skin and markings that didn't pulse so much as burn with steady light. In his hand, a collar, sleek, terrible, pulsing with command protocols. "A conductor and a keeper," Varys said, his voice carrying despite the chaos. "Efficient, but I only need one of you obedient." The collar flew toward Eloya with mechanical precision. Jace didn't think, didn't hesitate. He cut the angle, his hand closing around the device just as it activated. The metal was cold, then burning hot as it snapped around his neck of its own accord. Neural filaments pierced skin, burrowed deep. The world tilted, colors bleeding into sounds, sounds into pain. He heard himself speaking, "My breath, my burden," but the words felt distant, belonging to someone else. Then Eloya caught him, and her composure finally, completely shattered. "You reckless, impossible human," she breathed, tears like liquid starlight on her cheeks. Her hands cradled his face as the collar's programming tried to rewrite his nervous system. Through their contact, he felt her desperation, her fury, and underneath it all, something that might have been love if either of them had been brave enough to name it. The violet cohort formed a living wall around them as alarms shrieked. Strong hands, not Eloya's but following her barked orders, lifted him. The world blurred into motion, emergency lights, the sound of Eloya's voice commanding, threatening, pleading in turns, then darkness, warmth, and the sound of dripping water. The underground baths were older than the conservatory above, carved from stone that predated Silvertide's glass and light. Steam rose from natural hot springs, thick enough to blur the edges of everything. Jace lay on warm stone, shirt gone, the collar a ring of fire around his throat. Every breath was a battle against the geese whispering in his skull. Submit. Serve. Surrender. Eloya knelt beside him, her formal armor discarded for a simple shift that clung to her skin in the humidity. Her hands shook as she worked, spreading cooling oils along the burns where the collar met flesh. Each touch was careful, reverent, and when she spoke, her voice cracked at the edges. "Maids are trained to give everything." The words came out raw, unguarded. "Our whole existence is built on sacrifice, on placing another's needs above our own. But no one," her voice broke entirely, "no one ever taught us how to receive. You took my burden. You chose to carry what was meant for me." He caught her hand, stilling its movement. "Teach me what to carry and what to leave with you." She looked at him then, really looked, and he saw past every mask she'd worn. Underneath the competence, the danger, the casual confidence, was someone young and afraid and trying desperately to save everyone but herself. The kiss happened between heartbeats, soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid the other might break. Then hunger took over, weeks of tension and near-death experiences crystallizing into need. Her hands tangled in his hair, his arms pulled her closer, and through their synchronized biofields, each sensation doubled, reflected, amplified. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, the absence of contact actually hurt. "I need to tell you about Varys," she said, forehead resting against his. "He's not just corrupt. He loved someone once, my aunt, Irina." The story came out in whispers between the sound of dripping water and distant city noise. Young Varys, low caste but brilliant, falling for a maid whose station made their love impossible. The old laws that prevented mutual oaths between unequal classes. Irina's choice to perform the exhaustion ritual, giving her life force to save another man's child while Varys watched, helpless. "He thinks control is kindness," Eloya explained. "That slavery is safer than sacrifice. Every filament collar, every forced bond. He believes he's saving people from the fate that took Arena. He's wrong. Yes, but his pain is real. She pulled back slightly, studying his face. Can you understand that? How someone can be both monster and victim? Before he could answer, the steam parted. Nira Sorel stepped through, and she wasn't alone. A younger Vireldan girl followed, maybe 16 in human years, with Nira's sharp features but softer edges. Both bore the telltale scarring of recently removed collars. "I sold you out," Nira said without preamble, meeting Eloya's eyes steadily. "Varus promised my sister's freedom if I identified the human conductor's location. I knew it would lead to the cafe attack." Eloya was on her feet instantly, that not ceremonial knife suddenly in her hand, but Jace caught her wrist, feeling the rage thrumming through their connection. "Let her finish," he said quietly. Varus lied. Nira's composure cracked, showing the exhaustion beneath. The freedom was temporary. New collars were waiting. But you... She looked at Jace with something like awe. "You took a collar meant for another. That's not possible in our system. The code doesn't account for willing sacrifice from the powerful." "I'm not powerful," Jace said. "You're human," Nira replied. "Here, that's the same thing. You represent chaos in our ordered world. And chaos," she smiled, sharp and dangerous. "Chaos might be exactly what we need." The service tunnels beneath the conservatory thrummed with bioenergy that made Jace's teeth ache. Each footfall echoed in the narrow space, multiplied by the 37 freed maids and violet cohort members moving in practice synchronization behind them. The geese collar burned against his throat with every step, its neural filaments whispering commands he had to actively resist. Kneel, submit, obey. He countered each suggestion with deliberate asymmetry, tapping his fingers in 7/8 time against his thigh, breathing in patterns that defied Vireldan rhythm. Eloya moved beside him, her hand occasionally brushing his to maintain their biofield connection. Through these brief touches, he felt her determination mixed with something else, a fierce protectiveness that went beyond her oath. She changed from the elaborate ball gown into combat gear that was purely functional yet somehow made her more striking. The way the armor moved with her body, the silver hair now braided tight with those chiming threads muted for stealth, every detail spoke of lethal competence. "Next checkpoint in 30 meters, Nira whispered from behind them. The betrayer-turned-ally had proven invaluable, her knowledge of the conservatory's security protocols opening doors that should have been impassable. Etiquette sensors at maximum sensitivity. They'll trigger if anyone's posture deviates more than 3 degrees from standard. Then we give them something else to think about, Jace said, pulling a roll of silver tape from his pocket, Earth Maid smuggled in his luggage, completely alien to Vireldan systems. Everyone ready? The plan was absurdly simple, which made it perfect. Vireldan security relied on perfect patterns, on citizens who'd been trained from birth to move in harmony. They'd never encountered deliberate, coordinated chaos. "On my mark," Eloya said, her voice carrying that particular tone that made people obey without thinking. "Remember, 7/8 time, emphasis on the offbeats. Let your body find the spaces between proper rhythm." They rounded the corner as one unit. The checkpoint materialized, a crystal archway pulsing with sensor arrays, 2 guards in ceremonial armor that was more form than function. Jace started the cascade with a clap that landed exactly wrong, the sound sharp in the tunnel's acoustics. Others joined, each adding their own interpretation of incorrect timing. The harmony was in the disharmony, a wave of polite wrongness that made the sensors hiccup. The guards' bioluminescent patterns flared in confusion. One stepped forward, hand moving to his weapon, but Eloya was already there. Her bow of greeting became a sweep that took his legs. Her rising curtsy drove an elbow into his solar plexus. The second guard managed half a shout before Nira's modified courtesy gesture locked around his throat, the pressure precise enough to trigger unconsciousness without permanent damage. "Masks," Eloya commanded, and everyone pulled on the biodampeners they'd lifted from medical storage. The devices would muddle their biofield signatures for exactly 12 minutes, enough time if they move fast, through another set of doors, up a maintenance shaft that shouldn't have existed according to public blueprints. The conservatory's architecture became increasingly organic as they climbed, walls shifting from crystal to something that looked almost grown. Jace could feel the Prime Codex's presence like pressure in his ears, a subsonic hum that made his irregular heartbeat skip worse than usual. "You're resonating with it," Eloya observed, steadying him with a hand on his lower back. The touch was professional, but the way her fingers spread against his spine wasn't. "The Codex recognizes you as a conductor. It's interested." "Great. I'm fascinating to alien legal documents." His attempt at humor fell flat. Through their connection, he felt Eloya's spike of concern. "Jace." She pulled him aside as the others continued past, creating a moment of privacy in the chaos. "What you're about to see, Varys isn't just a monster. He's a man who broke under loss. Can you hold that complexity?" "Can you?" he countered. "Your aunt died because of the system he's perpetuating. She died because of the system he's trying to fix." Her bioluminescent markings dimmed, pulsing with something like grief. "His methods are wrong, but his pain—" An explosion rocked the tunnel, not behind them, ahead. Nira appeared through the smoke, her perfect features marred by a gash across her cheek that bled purple-silver. "Ambush!" she gasped. "Varys knew we'd come this way. He's channeling the Codex through Asha's collar, using her as a living focus. If we breach wrong, she dies." The team regrouped in a supply chamber, makeshift medical attention for the wounded while Jace sketched revision after revision on stolen smart paper. The plans grew increasingly desperate: frontal assault, misdirection, even a suicide run that Eloya shut down with a look that could have melted steel. "We're thinking like warriors," he said finally, crumpling the latest attempt. "But this isn't a battle, it's a negotiation." "You can't negotiate with someone who holds all the power," Nira said. "Sure you can." Jace stood, his hand finding the geese collar. "You just have to change what power means." The Cathedral of Living Law defied every sense Jace possessed. The walls breathed, literally breathed, with shifting clauses and subclauses that rewrote themselves in real time based on precedent and interpretation. The air itself carried harmonics stacked so deep he could taste them, copper and ozone and something like the smell of justice perverted into control. At the chamber's heart, the Prime Codex floated, a monolith of crystallized biomatter that had recorded every oath, every service contract, every interpretation of the Maid laws for 3 centuries. It pulsed with its own light, and that light was hungry. Archon Varys Seleth stood before it like a conductor before an orchestra. His silver-white skin showed a network of scars Jace hadn't noticed in the chaos of the ball, old burns, the kind you got from repeated exposure to bioenergy discharge. His daughter Asha knelt beside him, the collar around her throat connected to the Codex by threads of visible energy. She was conscious but barely, her teenage features twisted with the effort of breathing against the device's grip. 37 freed maids, Varys said without turning. His voice carried perfectly in the chamber's acoustics, cultured and tired in equal measure. The entire violet cohort, and 1 human conductor with a second-hand geese. Did you really think I wouldn't prepare for this? Holographic displays materialized around him, data streams, statistics, footage from across Verelda. Pre-filament mortality rate from exhaustion rituals, 18%. The number blazed red. Post-collar implementation, 2.3%. Green now. Off-world abuse complaints before my reforms, 4 times the current rate. More green numbers, each one a life theoretically saved. He turned then, and Jace saw the exhaustion carved into his features. This wasn't a megalomaniac drunk on power. This was a man who'd turned his grief into mathematics and thought he could solve suffering with sufficient control. "Which world is kinder?" Varys asked, and the question seemed genuine. "The one where love kills nearly 1 in 5, or the one where everyone lives, even if that life is constrained?" "The one where consent can't be faked," Aloya said, stepping forward, "where power can't be purchased." "Consent." Varys laughed, bitter and sharp. Irina consented to die. She chose the exhaustion ritual, chose to give her life for a child that wasn't even hers. The system gave her that choice, and she took it. His composure cracked. "I watched her breathe herself to death over 73 hours, legally, consensually. Tell me, Keeper Varel, where was the kindness in that choice?" The Codex flared, responding to his emotion. Asha gasped, her collar tightening. Around the chamber's perimeter, 24 collared maids stepped from hidden alcoves, a choir of the enslaved, their biofields harmonized into a weapon. "Submit," Varys commanded, and the word carried the weight of law itself. "Kneel, and I'll make it painless. Resist, and—" Jace laughed. It started as a chuckle, then grew into something genuine and slightly unhinged. The acoustics caught it, amplified it, turned it into discord that made the choir's harmony waver. "You want to know what's funny?" Jace asked, still grinning as the geese collar burned protest into his nerves. "You're trying to use perfect order to prevent chaos. But chaos isn't the opposite of order. It's order's dance partner." He started clapping, that same 7/8 rhythm that had confused every Vareldan system they'd encountered. One clap, then another, deliberately offbeat. Behind him, Nira picked it up, then another freed maid, then another. The rhythm spread, each person adding their own interpretation, creating a wave of coordinated wrongness that made the chamber's suppression grid stutter. "Stop," Varys commanded. But commands required harmony to propagate, and harmony was dissolving into something stranger, not chaos, but complexity, order with jazz hands. Aloya moved, not toward Varys, but into the choir itself, her combat form flowing between the enslaved maids. She wasn't attacking, she was dancing, adding her own movement to the irregular rhythm. Each step broke their formation slightly, each gesture pulled their attention. The choir's unified field began to fragment. "You think suffering is mathematics," Jace called out, advancing step by offbeat step. "But people aren't numbers, they're stories, and stories." He tore at his collar, feeling the filaments burn as he fought against the geese. Stories change based on who's telling them. The collar came free in a spray of blood and biomatter. Pain lanced through his nervous system, but pain was just another rhythm to absorb. He held the broken device high, its neural filaments still writhing like angry snakes. "The old world died because oaths were one-sided," he said, his voice raw but steady. "So let's give it something it can't corrupt." Jace and Aloya knelt facing each other in the eye of the storm. Around them, the choir's harmony had dissolved into individual voices, some still trying to maintain Varys's command, others beginning to echo the irregular rhythm. The codex pulsed overhead, its light shifting spectrums as it tried to process what was happening. They placed their hands over each other's hearts. Equal height, equal risk, equal choice. Through the contact, Jace felt everything Aloya was, her fear, her hope, her fierce determination to change a world that had shaped her into a weapon and called it service. She felt him too, the guilt over Maya, the terror of connection, the desperate need to build something better from the ashes of what was broken. "I keep your breath, and you keep mine," they spoke in unison. their voices finding a harmony that had nothing to do with Vareldan perfection and everything to do with human messiness. I set you free, and you set me free. No claim without consent, no service without choice. In pause, in change, in ending, our yes remains the law. The Codex, designed to learn from living precedent, began to rewrite itself. The transformation was visible, clauses flowing like liquid light, restructuring around the new paradigm. Every Maid law, every interpretation, every precedent suddenly had to account for mutual consent, for the right to pause, for the possibility that both parties were equally powerful and equally vulnerable. Consent beacons, mandatory paired devices, changes requiring both parties. Pause, resume. Either party may suspend oath temporarily without penalty. Revocation. Either party may end oath with notice. Public ledger. All oaths recorded, auditable, transparent. Age restrictions. No minors, no proxy consent, no inherited obligations. The golden light that flooded the chamber wasn't harsh. It was warm, like sunrise after a long night. Throughout Silvertide, throughout Verelda, collars fell from necks like dead leaves. The enslaved choir gasped as their own voices returned to them. Some fell, some stood, all breathed free for the first time in years. Asha's collar released with a crystalline chime. She collapsed, but breathing, always breathing. Varus stood frozen as his life's work unraveled. Everything he'd built to prevent another Irina was dissolving into something he couldn't control. His hand moved to the chamber's failsafe, a destruct sequence that would bury them all rather than allow this change. "Your daughter lives under the new law," Jace said, stepping between Vera's and the controls. Blood still ran from where the collar had been, but his voice was steady. The breath beacons enforce mutual consent. Pause and revoke protect the vulnerable. The public ledger makes exploitation expensive and visible. He extended his hand, not in threat, but in offer. "Keep your book of breaths, Varus. Just change the ink. Record choices, not commands. Honor Irina by preventing her sacrifice from being forced on others, not by forcing everyone into safety." Varus looked at his daughter. Really looked. Asha was breathing steadily now, her eyes open, focused, free. The first free breath she'd taken in 3 years, and it was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. His hand trembled over the failsafe. Aloya crossed the distance in 3 quick steps, but she didn't attack. She simply placed her hand over his, not restraining, just present. "Help us keep the guard true," she said quietly. "Or stand aside while we do, but don't make Asha lose her father the same day she gains her freedom." The fight went out of him like air from a punctured suit. Varus aged a decade in seconds, his perfect posture crumbling. "Then teach me," he whispered, "how to live with what I've done." 6 months. Hence. The celebration in Silvertide streets had been going for 3 hours and showed no signs of stopping. Fireworks bloomed overhead in deliberately irregular patterns. 7/8 time made visible, chaos and order dancing together in sparks of purple and gold. The sound of laughter, offbeat clapping, and occasional harmonies that deliberately broke themselves filled the air. From the balcony of what had been the conservatory's elite viewing platform, Jace watched the city remake itself in real time. Below, a young couple approached the public ledger, a crystalline structure that recorded oaths with perfect transparency. They pressed their consent beacons together, the devices flaring gold as they registered mutual agreement. The crowd cheered, then laughed as the couple immediately pressed them again, activating the pause function. "Testing it out," the young man called up, grinning. "Want to make sure we can actually stop if we need to." "The early days were rougher," Aloya said, joining him at the railing. She wore her new Guardian uniform, honoring the traditional silhouette, but transformed in purpose. The armor was lighter, the apron mantle more functional, and the whole ensemble designed for protection rather than subservience. 36 pauses in the first hour. People were so excited to have the option, they kept using it just to prove they could. And now? Now it's normal, boring even. She smiled, and it reached those impossible starburst eyes. Exactly as it should be. He could still feel the ghost of the geas collar sometimes, phantom burns when he was stressed, whispers of commands when exhausted. But he'd learned to counter them with irregular tapping, with deliberate asymmetry, with the kind of human chaos that no Vireldan system could fully process. Varus sent another revision to the rehabilitation protocols, Aloya mentioned, pulling up a holo display. His proposals for treating collar trauma are actually quite good. Guilt makes a hell of a motivator. So does redemption. She dismissed the display and moved closer, her hand finding his where it rested on the railing. He's teaching at the medical center now. Asha visits every week. Through their touch, he felt the complexity of her emotions, satisfaction at the changes, worry about the challenges ahead, and underneath it all, that warm current of affection that had grown from curiosity to something neither of them had quite named yet. "You kept your promise," she said. "You held the line." "We held it together," he corrected, pulling her close. Below, the violet cohort had formed a circle in the main plaza. Nira's voice carried up, sharp and amused. "Save some breath for the rest of us, you two." Aloya laughed, a sound like silver bells in rain, like promises kept and futures opened. "My breath is spoken for," she called back, then kissed him as the city roared approval. The kiss was long, deep, and completely inappropriate for a public display. It was also perfectly imperfect, slightly off-angle, breathing not quite synchronized, human messiness meeting alien grace and finding something new in the space between. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, the fireworks were reaching their climax, bursts of light in every spectrum, rhythms that made no sense and perfect sense simultaneously. The city below moved in its new pattern, not the lockstep of enforced harmony, but the complex beauty of chosen cooperation. "So what now?" Jace asked, his arm around her waist, her head against his shoulder. "Now we teach others. The Guard needs training in the new ways. Other worlds are watching, wanting to implement their own versions." She paused, and he felt her smile against his neck. And Varus had one good point in his proposals. The conductor program should be expanded. If humans can sync with our biofields. "You want me to help train other humans to resonate?" "I want you to help build bridges." She pulled back to look at him, and her expression was serious despite the celebration around them. "What we did here, it's not an ending, it's a beginning. Other worlds, other systems, other kinds of service that need reimagining." He thought about Maya, about holding lines and making choices, about the difference between hesitation and consideration, between sacrifice and surrender. "Together?" he asked. "Always," she answered, "or at least until one of us presses pause." They both laughed at that, and the sound joined the symphony of the city below, imperfect, irregular, beautifully human and alien all at once. The Geas collar's ghost whispered one last time in his mind, and he countered it with a final tap of 7/8 against the railing. The whisper died. The future opened, and in the streets of Silvertide, under stars that pulsed with alien light, two worlds danced toward tomorrow in deliberately imperfect time.